Welcome to the Amery Board of Education special meeting. I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Oh, here, I thought they were coming. They were rushing to get to the meeting in time.
They were coming for community comments.
You're late. You're late.
And we'll start off with our informational items. And there you go, Sean.
Okay, well, what I'm going to use to help walk us through this, it's really centered on two pieces. PTO, which is paid time off in remote instruction, is a PowerPoint that I used with the advisory committee, which is a cross-section of staff that represent all staff that meets 6 or so times a year. And I also used to present at each of the building staff meetings over the course of the last 2 weeks. Some of this is old news and that you've already seen it and talked about it, and some of it is new. So, the timeline that you see on the screen, on March 13th, you saw some of the proposed language right here in this room. Today here is the 13th. We're going to talk about, again, PTO and remote stuff. And then you have a meeting on Monday to talk about all of it. So that's the background of where we have come from, so to speak. At the March meeting, you talked about salary schedule, payroll deposits, retirement sub-plans, and workday appointments. I'll walk through that very quickly, and if you have items that you want to share, you certainly can do that. This is the proposed salary growth year 3. We're in the blue column next year. Right now, we're in the 22-23 school year. The hope is to move that forward to the 23-24 wage. We will not be able to do that by the time contracts go out because we have to wait for the state to have a biennium budget so we then know our revenue streams. And when we know that, then we will be able to game plan. The hope is that we'll be able to move that forward, but we don't know that quite yet. But it is there, don't forget about it, so to speak. Payroll deposit, this is the don't wait next to your computer refreshing constantly at 12:01 a.m. It'll be deposited at some point during that day. That's banking language. So that's that portion. The retirement language, this is not low-hanging fruit. This is a change. So let's talk about this. We had already had some conversation about it. This is the additional conversation opportunity. Employees who meet the eligibility requirements are for retiring who have more than 100 days of PTO accrued shall be credited with $130. This would be for the school year 23-24, that's next year. And then for the year after, it would be $100. We're not doing any taking action on anything. This is a first reading here this evening, but if there is an action on Monday, the only recommendation I would have would be a recommendation for the 23-24 portion of this language. If you're wondering what the language presently states, it says current rate of sub-pay, which is $130. So there isn't any dollar change for next year. It's just changing from words to numbers. For employees that are between 50 and 99, it would go from 130 to 65, half. Obviously, it's a smaller portion of days, so it's a half in regards to the payout. And then it would be 50 for the year after. The proposal for, sorry?
So 50 to 90 days, what if you have 40 days?
You don't get paid for those days.
Okay.
So you, for vested in purposes, we would move from 15 years in district to 10, and for vested in from 56 to 55. That's a change as well, and you'll see that once we get to the documents in yellow throughout. Additional questions about the retirement language piece that you see here?
Yeah, why don't we pay out for anything under 50 days?
We just never have.
Never has.
You can.
Gotta get to 50
So-
days before you get paid out.
What was that, Dale?
Well, I'm just thinking, if that was me, if I'm sitting, on my last 2 years, and I have 30 days, and I feel like I'm not gonna get to 50 to get paid anything, why wouldn't you,
Some have done just that, and they burned them.
use them up, right?
But remember this, of the 39 schools in the CESA, there are only 5 that are unlimited in regards to payout. no one in the CISA has as many in regards to what we pay out as what we do. And most districts cap it under 100. As you'll see here, there are some caps. When you cap it under 100, there are people here, Becky and I just ran an example of a person today that's 299. They could literally miss all of the next school year and still have days left in their bank. So if you're paying out for every single one of them, you have to remember the budgetary impact of that too.
Yeah.
So sick day payouts, this is a comparison with 14 other schools in the CISA. The reason I chose these 14 other schools is because these schools in these school districts make up the highest number of dollars in payout of the 39 schools in CISA. So if you have 100 days in your bank at $130, the math of that is $13,000. If you have 200 days, the math of that for Amery is $26,000. And you'll see there on the screen, there isn't anyone in the 100-day payout that's over 10, and there isn't anyone besides us, well, Turtle Lake, in the 200 column that's over 10,000. We're at 26,000.
And honestly, this is a good idea to show in the CISA because these are the schools that theoretically we would be competing for when it comes to hiring teachers and maintaining staff, right?
And presently are. We've been in conversations these last 2 weeks with, we're trying to hire so-and-so, and they're competing with X, Y, and Z districts happening right now. Wage matters. Retirement package matters, certainly. Other comments or questions about the proposal to move from 130 to 100, or one sub-language to 130, and then we'll talk about it further as we move forward. This slide goes with the previous slides as well. This is the sub-rate history. We go back to 2004. That's all the further back that skyward goes. And neither Becky nor I were in this office prior to 2004. It could have still been 90. I don't have a clue, but it was 90 in 2004. So those 11 years was at 90. Then for that year it was at 100. And you know, some of you have lived it. We've continued to increase their sub rate because we've had to stay competitive. 116, then 125, and now 130. And I imagine we'll go up from there because everyone else will too. So we wanted to move it away from the language of current rate of sub pay because that's a flexible number, and that makes it hard to budget. Because if it goes up to 135, that's money. So 130 is easier to budget for.
I know I subbed in 2001 and it was $90 a day in 2001.
So we can change the graph to 2001.
Adjusted
Now I'm
for
starting to feel
inflation, adjusted for inflation, it was pretty good though.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yes.
Yeah. Not bad.
So questions about that proposed change? Again, it's not an action item tonight, just conversation. Okay.
So sorry,
Go ahead.
I'm late with asking a
That's
question.
all right.
So
Go
right
ahead.
now, we're not talking about capping it or anything. That's not a proposed language change
Nope.
at this time. We're just,
The only proposal is to
information.
change it from current rate of sub pay to $130. No cap and no 100.
and then are we talking about approving and then $100 for the school year 2024 and 25?
My only proposal would be to act on what we're doing for 23, 24, but you can do what you want on Monday, certainly. But that's not my proposal. That's merely, the purpose of putting it out that far in advance is to let folks that are in the age of retirement in considering that as an option, for them to know there might be a change, which is why I haven't proposed to change it for next year, sort of pulling the rug out. Remember, this group of folks is not everybody. It's the 22 people that are in the old retirement plan. And the 22 people are probably retiring within the next 5 to 8 years, or maybe a little longer, depending on what their plan is. So give them a forewarning, it might change.
So that $100 number is really just a placeholder for
It
them?
is.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, sub-plans, we just want folks to have sub-plans ready for sub when they show up. If you're a long-term absence, like you're on a disability for some reason, or you're on an FMLA, the expectation is that you'll simply work with the long-term sub to keep the guardrails on, so to speak, in your absence. But you're not responsible for day-to-day planning if you're on a maternity leave, for instance. So that's the sub-plan language.
I have a question about that.
Yes.
Is there a place that, like, usually each individual teacher then keeps that sub-plan, and how is that told to or relayed to the sub for the day?
I'll defer to these ladies. They probably know better than I.
Yeah, we have 3-ring binders that we have in each classroom, and then there's a subfolder within the office that they're expected to put all of the safety manuals and their schedules and all of the plans for students in, so that it would be a grab-and-go kind of a thing if it was an unplanned absence. And then they also put together long-term if they know that they're going to be gone. So yes, they're laid out for them.
I would agree. I would build upon that they're in our office, so, you know, substitutes check in within our office, and then Mrs. Hope, for example, gives them a room key, a borrow laptop, and then gives them that binder that contains a class list, the emergency plans, contact information, and then there's also always kind of a peer teacher that's referenced in there, so if they have questions, they could go to, you know, Mrs. Amon's room.
Okay. And then, are our teachers required at this point to turn in weekly lesson plans then?
Correct.
And then, okay.
Yes.
So in case something were to happen, then, okay.
I think ours is by 8 o'clock on Monday morning, they're to have their week's lessons. That way if something were to happen, it's something we can quick reference to find out where they were in pacing.
Yeah, same, and they're all saved out by each week of the
Okay.
school year.
All right, workday appointments. We have had folks that have need to leave early for work appointments during the workday. We're going to work with those folks with this following language. If it's necessary for an employee to schedule an appointment during the workday, they can leave as early as 2:45 or come as late as 8:30. All they need to do is communicate with their building supervisor, and they wouldn't have to use a half day of PTO to come late or to leave early. If they don't have permission, that's obviously another situation, but just ask for permission. I use this example in every staff meeting. I'll use it again for you to understand where we're at on a flexibility standpoint. A staff person approached me about 3 weeks ago and said, I have an ongoing appointment. I have to go to Amery Hospital and Clinic to have a procedure done once a month for 6 consecutive months, and the latest in the day they'll do it is 2:30. Do I have to take a PTO? And the answer is, of course you don't. Just go do your thing and we'll cover you. You can't not do it. The doctor tells you need to do it. I'm assuming they're telling you for a reason to do it. So no, we're not going to dock anyone. We just want you to communicate with us and be here. And if you absolutely can't, you can't. So that's the language surrounding workday appointment. So here's the new stuff. We're here on the 13th of April. We got some PTO, PDH, leave without pay, and remote instruction. So let's walk through that. The proposal for PTO is for every staff person, July 1 of each year is the beginning of our school year. In essence, they would get 12 PTO to replace the current sick leave, personal day, and emergency leave that they presently have. The PTO is used to account for all absences. Can't use PTO on in-service days, parent-teacher conference days, or other noted blackout dates, and you'll see that blackout dates in a couple slides. At the end of the year, the unused PTO get dropped into your PTO retirement bank, and you get a fresh set of 12 when you get to the beginning of the next school year. So everyone would get 12 brand-new days on July 1 of 2023. And on June 30th of 2024, what you have left, goes in your bank, and you can get paid for those through the retirement system. So that's PTO in a nutshell in summary. And I'll stop there and let you ask any questions, and then we can proceed if you don't. Okay, so again, at the end of the year, each employee's remaining sick bank is sick days are moved into their PTO retirement sick bank. Retirement bank is not available for you to use in conjunction, is available for you to use if it's for a reason of FMLA, short-term disability, or long-term disability. For instance, if you're going out on maternity leave, you're not going to cover that absence with 12 days. So you'll need to dip into your bank to use other days. You're likely to be using the 12 weeks, and that's FMLA, job protected. If you want to use 12 weeks, we're obligated by law to allow you to do that. You use whatever days you have in your bank to cover it, because if you don't use those days, you wouldn't get paid. So they can dip into their bank for those reasons. Okay? Here is a little math for you. I'm a social studies guy by trade, but with Becky's assistance and Twyla's assistance, we got some data put together. So if you follow along either on your page or on the screen, if you look to the far left of the screen or the far left of your page, you'll see blue, orange, gray, yellow, and green. If you focus on the blue line, that's the number that represents the total number of PTOs used by all staff in the district in the school year 17-18. So on average, the number of days used was 5.75, so call it a half dozen. That was true in the elementary school, it was true in the intermediate school. Middle school and high school used a little bit less. So on average, over the course of that entire school year, about 6 of the 12 would have been used. And the reason we generated this data is to determine if 12 is a fair and accurate number. We didn't want to set the number so low that folks would be out of days by November and then they would be in trouble. This demonstrates they're working a whole school year and there's still 6 left in their bank and they can bank those. It's a reasonable number. 18-19 looks very much the same as 17-18. The number in 21-22 is higher, and I think there are 2 reasons why. First, I think we had COVID still hanging around, and we had a lot of personal day use in 2021, 2022, because remember, they didn't have to pay for those days, and there were a lot. Remember, there were 212 personal days used last year, and in 17-18 and 18-19, there were a total of about 140, so it was significantly higher. 22-23 looks very much the same as 17-18 and 18-19. We got 2 months to go here. It'll probably be the same in the end. And then your district average overall, if you look on the far right of the screen. So if you use all of this data, which would be about 500 data points, using our real actual staff, your average number of PTO used in that time is about 6, about half of your 12. Which leads me to believe it's a pretty fair and accurate number. Folks aren't running into a hardship with running out of days, and they're able to take whatever days they need in order to take care of whatever they got to take care of. Questions about the data? I know there's a lot of numbers and colors and such up there.
No, it's nice to see that, though, that this wasn't just like a shot in the dark of
No.
12 days, and it's nice for people to see a representation of what's average across the district, so.
And the next slide gives you an actual person count. It's the same letter, or same colors and the same years. So if you look on the far left, in 17-18, that means 3 total people out of our entire staff, call it 125-ish certified staff, only 3 people went past 12. And the folks that win past 12 are typically going 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, somewhere around there. 7 people in 18-19, more in 21-22. And I believe that had a lot to do with COVID and some to do with personal days. And the total number of people, so about 500 or so data points, we've had 31 people make it to that mark of 12 and beyond. And if the truth be told, in some instances, all 4 years the same person made that mark. So that 31 is not 31 people, because some folks were in every one of those other 4 years. So this is a person count of what attendance looks like. So again, it seems like a fair and reasonable number in that it's under 12 in nearly every case out of your 500 data points. Questions about this set of data?
And so with the current plan that we have, they are allowed 10 sick days, 2 emergency
2 personal days, 3 emergency days, 15 total.
personal, okay.
This is 12, that there is a slide coming up that gets you 3 more for bereavement, if you looked ahead in the slide deck. So you'll get to your same number of 15 here soon. But yes, those are the right numbers, yes.
So they kind of had 15 days possible to take, and they could trade in their PDH
You still can do that.
for 2 additional days.
Yes, you can still do that.
So I mean, I guess I'm just trying to say, if they took 15 days, it wasn't like they were, I don't know, taking days without pay or something.
Nope.
They could have been using all the different kinds of categories
Sure.
to get there.
But the trick with, the benefit, I believe, with PTO, and I have this as a slide coming up, is you're not going to be asked to define your day. It's just a paid time off day. Because right now, I think one of the biggest points of contention is folks get riled up about, why are you asking why I'm using my day? I'm just gone. Stop asking about it. With PTO, no one has any cause to ask. But if you use an emergency day, it's got to qualify as an emergency. It's not a vacation, that's an emergency. If it's sick, it's sick. If it's personal, it's personal. Right now, there's all sorts of contention about what these days are defined as. PTO takes it off the
And if it's
table.
personal,
That's
you
very
have
true.
to pay your sub, right now, right?
Yes, in
So
this you
this
won't.
eliminates that.
It does. So the introductory language, I'd like you to focus on that first paragraph, and it states, certified staff are contracted to work a specific number of days each school year. These required days of work include student contact days, in-service days, days of parent-teacher conferences. It's the expectation of the school district of Amery that by signing a contract for employment, certified staff are agreeing to work each of the required days, and failure to do so is a breach of contract. We simply want you here when the kids are here, and when there's in-service, and when there's parent-teacher conferences. But the district does acknowledge that there's times where you have sickness of your own or a family member, and there's other things that have to be done. I always use the example of a house closing. You don't get to pick the date and the time. If it's at 1 o'clock, it's at 1 o'clock on Tuesday, and you gotta go. So you just gotta do that, and you have to use a day to do it. You can't do it outside of the day, so PTO is what you use. So that's the introductory language surrounding PTO. Now, no more than 10 PTO requests in a given day, and you'll see some data here coming up that verify it's not an arbitrary number. It actually, I believe, will work. After the 10th day, you would need some special approval from your supervisor and/or district administrator. We realize life happens. You get sick, and there's a bunch of people gone. Your kid gets sick. Life happens. We'll work with you. We don't want people running to the doctor because there's a financial component to having to run to the doctor, but we want people to be able to be here. That second paragraph, he's got to fill out the sub-request form. And then lastly, the district administrator has a right to approve or deny all requests for PTO. Typically, I'm going to say, you met with so-and-so, Mrs. D'Ambrosio or Mrs. Johnson as an example. I understand, approved, of course. It likely won't even land in my lap most times. So the data that you see, same colors, same years. This is the average staff absent per day. So back in 2017, 2018, the average number of staff gone for an emergency day, sick day, or personal day was just over 3. In 18-19, just shy of 4. In 21-22, up towards 6. And in the present year, we're at just over 4. So overall 500, or actually I should say 175 times 4 years, you're looking at 700-800 data points. About 4 people gone in a day is about the average. So we're well under 10. Have we had days? Yeah, when you add in benchmark testing and someone's going to a state tournament series and CISA workshops, yeah, there are days it's past 20. But just for emergency, personal, and sick, the averages have been right around 3, 4, 5. So it's a reasonable number in my mind. Questions about the data or comments that you'd like to make?
I have a question. Does this language apply to admin as well?
Yep.
Okay,
Their contracts will be changed to PTO as well,
okay. And then,
if that's the change the district chooses
okay,
to make.
okay. So vacation, all that stuff?
Well, the administrative
different?
contract looks a little different in that it's a year-round contract, but we're moving to PTO just like certified staff and just like support staff. Same number of days, just like it is for the others, but the language would change to mirror that, yes.
Okay.
I guess I'm just kind of wondering in regards to that, we understand people get sick and stuff like that, but is the language in here, is it legal, I guess, in regards to asking people to show a doctor's note if required? It just says if a doctor's note is required, so in some circumstances, it's gonna be required.
Mm-hmm.
What are the circumstances and?
Well, if someone continues to be gone well past their 12, we're going to start asking for verification that they have a medical condition, and that's the reason they're gone. We have a situation like that right now where a person's been out since the end of January, and a doctor's note's what we've been using, and that's been with legal counsel. That's the first thing they've told us. If they're going to be gone due to a health condition, they got to have a doctor's note. You can require that. They don't have to give you one, but if they're not willing to give you one, then it's likely they're not going to be able to be employed. because they have to document why they're gone.
Yeah, I
They can't
guess.
just choose to be.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily thinking more towards the people who are like long-term sick. I'm just thinking about like, you know, when the fall comes around and everybody gets the cold or the flu. And you have, like, again, I have a really good record, but yet I'm number 11 and you're like, and I'm, you know, sick as a dog.
Typically, we're not going to send anyone to the doctor. If it's a repeated episode, we're probably going to say, every Monday, really?
Yeah.
That's not, I mean.
And
that's
this is
just
mostly
way-
kind of just to protect the district
Yeah.
and them from being in breach of the contract that
Yep.
they signed. But like, I think when we talked about this in negotiations, it's more of a repeat kind of a thing, in that it's always up to the district administrator what they're gonna require, but
But in simple form, to answer your question, Joe, can we require a doctor's note? Yes, we can. Are we going to likely do that very often? Probably not.
Yeah.
So 10 is the number, that's the data surrounding it. The PTO positives, and the district didn't even really set out to achieve these items. It just sort of happened as an ancillary benefit of what we're trying to do here, which is to get people to be here when the kids are here. No reasons required for your absence, no need to classify it here in this office as PTO. You could literally go on a 12-day trip, or you could literally stay home for 12 days if you wanted to. They're your days. No pay docs, so you're really putting $260 back in your pocket, $130 and $130. And you can now add 12 days into your PTO bank as opposed to the 10 you could before. So theoretically, in the presence language, you're also adding another $260 into your pocket. So it really puts over $500 back in your pocket if we make this change. PDH day trades, this language looks similar to what it presently is and mirrors some of what you just saw. You can earn up to 2 additional days off of paid time. 20 PDH gets you a day, 10 gets you a half a day. PDH day trades are free with no requirement to reimburse the district. You have to earn the days prior to making the request. You can't do an IOU on PDH. That doesn't work. You gotta have it done. So that's what PDH looks like now, truly, and what it looks like in this scale. I missed this when we were going through the PTO language before, but it mirrored again here. In addition to parent-teacher conferences and in-service days, the days that we would have blacked out are any scheduled days off in February, March, April, and May. The Fridays and Mondays after those breaks get hit fairly hard. For instance, the Friday before Memorial Day this year has already got 5 people gone on it, and that's been capped. It creates a 4-day weekend, I get it, but we're trying to avoid that. February, March, April, and May would in essence mean Easter, spring break, and Memorial Day. You'll always have off the Friday before Easter because that's a contracted day off. That's Good Friday. There's no way around that. That's a for sure. Spring break is scheduled for next year, the week of Monday, March 18th. We simply want you to leave on Saturday or Sunday, not Friday, and want you to come back the following Sunday, not Monday. That's all it is. Thanksgiving and Christmas were untouched. We don't typically have a Christmas issue in regards to a lot of people being gone. Christmas, I believe, is on a Tuesday or a Wednesday next year, or this year, which is helpful for travel reasons. You'll be able to get where you're going. You'll have all weekend and Monday to do that. And Thanksgiving, I think from a cultural standpoint around here, it would be tough to do blackouts around Thanksgiving, because from that standpoint, we got a lot of folks that make family outings that are connected to deer hunting and Thanksgiving. That's just what we do here, and it hasn't been a problem. So we didn't touch those days. Questions about February, March, April, and May?
I think Christmas is cultural too.
It
And in
is.
some cases Easter. But obviously when it doesn't fall on a Monday or something like that, or a Friday, it makes it a little easier for people that are hosting Christmas or something like that to get ready. And it's nice to see that wasn't touched then this year as well.
Any other questions, comments? Okay.
So that's true not just for the PDH day trades, but also for the PTO
Yes.
days?
Yes. Have to fill out a leave of absence request form, same as PTO. And the district administrator has the right to approve or deny PDH day trades. I've never sat with anyone and ever had a conversation about PDH day trade. That's never happened. I don't know why it would now. You got 20, great. Turn it in if you want. Bereavement leave. It was originally titled funeral leave, but with help from the advisory committee, and they oftentimes have excellent ideas that are just off my radar. A funeral may not be local. You might have to travel, and it is bereavement. So 3 days will help you cover that. Travel to the day for the funeral, then the day of the funeral, then the travel home. That could be a 3-day event. If it's here in town, obviously, it's a 1-day event. So you have 3 days of bereavement. If you want to use those 3 separate times or one time, you can do that, and it doesn't cost you a single PTO. Then who is qualified for, your immediate family and so forth, is all spelled out there. To the district, it felt off to say that you need to use a PTO to do a bereavement, AKA funeral, because you're not going to skip funerals. You need to go, and then that depletes the PTO. And this gets us back to the 15. The 12 PTO plus 3 bereavement gets you back to 15. So the number remains the same, though it's titled a little different, that is true. Questions about bereavement or comments? Okay. Leave without pay. If an employee has exhausted all their PTO, the district administrator will determine whether a subsequent employee absence can be covered by their PTO retirement bank or if they are a leave without pay. Employees who have depleted their current year's PTO and their PTO retirement bank and do not come to work will receive leave without pay. And on the next screen, you'll see what that in essence looks like. There are the 3 steps. The first of which you would be doctor per diem and a verbal reprimand. The second would be doctor per diem and then a written reprimand. And the third, you'd be fired. If the truth be told, we have an employee in district right now that is well past their 12. They're into the 20s, and they would likely have been terminated by now based on their attendance track record. This is not something anyone takes lightly. It's not something we want to do, but we need people to be here. And if we can't count on them being here, it's probably time for them to not be here. So you have days at your disposal each and every year, and we hope that folks use them wisely. And if not, put them in their bank in case something happens. And if not, we're going to be in this boat. Questions about leave without pay? Okay. Remote instruction days. Here's what this reads. On days of remote instruction, certified staff are not required to physically report to work. Building administrators will design that remote instructional day. Certified staff are required to follow those instructions on how remote instruction is delivered. And staff need to be cognizant that their top priority is the kids that they're instructing while on remote instruction. Where this came from was a lot of conversation about the equity of having to report. What does it look like at the middle and high school where they're online with kids for 4, 5, 6 hours? What does it look like at the elementary intermediate? I think we could safely say that everyone's working hard in all of these buildings, and the scorecarding of it isn't helpful. And further, to come to work when we just dropped 14 inches of snow on the ground and your road won't get plowed until 2 o'clock is probably not safe. So if we can keep them home and keep them safe, that would be helpful. And if the truth be told, I'm not doing it, but remote instruction, for having never done it before like this, has worked. It's worked really well at middle and high school in the distribution of, the completion of, and the bringing back of the work that intermediate and elementary school staff. Their system is fantastic, and it's working really well. And no one wants to tack days on in June. One of our neighbors, their last day of school presently is June 12th, and that's not going to be fun.
And this then proposal that we have on the screen is different than the highlighted proposal that we had received at the last board meeting then?
Correct.
Okay, because that was my question.
Yep.
Okay.
And this has been with a lot of conversation with certified staff. This was maybe the item that the folks were most energized by. I can't say that for sure, but it was a physical safety question. The last
see that.
storm that we had, my road wasn't done until nearly 2 o'clock. I suppose I could have gotten here, but I'm not driving a bus. and I'm just driving me and my kids. I mean, that's tough. Say high school kid, just get here. That's tough.
If we were to do that, I guess, outside of the COVID, what are the numbers of, percentage of participation in like the remote days we've had?
I can say, and maybe you guys could help me, middle school I know for certain because Tom was ecstatic and stunned. The first day was up towards 95%, he said.
Just as good as in person.
Yeah, you're right, that was
There's a few
the,
that never will do anything. no
yeah,
matter
the
what.
assessment came down to those who weren't engaged when we're all here, weren't engaged when we were online either.
Okay.
So that's probably not too big a surprise. It's worked really well, and I also was fearful of, and perhaps the two of you could speak to this, when we send stuff home, is it just sitting there on the kitchen table and no one's touching it? Is it never being brought back? That's not what's happening. There's an accountability process. This is what you need to do. It's checked, and when it's brought back, and my snow day folder is still sitting right there on the con. I don't want to use it, but it's still sitting there. And there's a lot of accountability surrounding it. It's worked. And for never doing it, we actually did pretty well. I shouldn't say it in the past tense. That means it's over, because it's not, perhaps, over. So, I know it's 80, but, yeah,
We're talking snow this weekend, but at least it'll be the weekend.
yes. So it's worked. is
Well, I
the-
mean, even, Rochester schools with technology down, or we have a physical building problem or something like that, education is still continue.
Mhm.
They still got it up.
Remember about 5 years ago, we had a water day. Remember the water was out in town? That's the weather event at all. That was no water. You gotta have water.
Yep, and that kind of brings up another point, we build in some snow days. I kind of wondered if we should use the first one and then save the second one for an emergency, you know what I'm saying? And go to remote learning for like
Right.
after the first snow day, so that in case we have an emergency that we have not been able to send home laptops, for example.
Right.
We kind of have one in the bank.
Also, I'm gonna bring to you, to the board here in the next couple of months on the calendar for 23, 24, or 22, 23, I should say. No, what year are we in? 23, 24, oh my goodness.
You have 3 kids.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dad brain.
23, 24, to look at that April in-service day of 24 and do a new symbol, if you can find another symbol with that, and say, this one, if something's gotta happen, we might make this into a school day rather than an in-service. I mean, rather than going to school in June, that seems to me like a good idea. We don't always have an April in-service, but that might be a good idea to have that in our pocket. Because remember, we only have 2 days built in next year because of the calendar change with referendum. Other questions or comments about remote instruction?
I think it's great to not require them to physically report to work, because if we're calling school off specifically for severe weather and snow and ice and whatnot, I don't think the staff should try to have to
No,
get through that.
Yeah, I'll agree. I thought the same thing. I was preparing and looking at that, and I thought, well, it's not great.
If we're saying it's not safe.
Right, it's not safe. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, we just live on those. Some of us live on those township roads,
Right.
and we were getting plowed out till 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And
Right.
the last snow, there was no way. Even the tractors were having a hard time making it
was
down the
so
road.
heavy.
We couldn't get there.
Yeah.
We live in town, but not everyone lives in town.
Right.
Right.
For some people, they could make it, but some people it's just, they don't have 4-wheel drive or whatever.
Right.
It doesn't work.
You could always use your snowmobile, I guess.
That's right.
We're gonna have to invest.
Sean, can I
Yes.
backtrack?
Go ahead.
Are we able to backtrack?
Yep, go ahead.
So, especially the last month, we communicated quite a bit about our financial struggles coming up in the future. We just, and I know we're talking about losing, what was it, 4 to 5 teachers over the next 5 years,
That's possible with enrollment, yes.
just to be able to make our budget. And then, I'll be honest, you just threw a ton of money at me right now.
In which part?
Retirements. And again, like I told you, and I wanna be really clear, I am a member of a union. So, and everything that I strive for has to be fair and equitable for not just staff, but.
Are you
then-
referencing this portion, this
No,
stuff?
I'm actually referencing like the retirement itself.
Sick day payouts.
payouts.
Oh, yeah, this slide.
Yeah, and
Back up a little bit
Back
more,
up
Becky.
one more.
number 6.
Yeah, that
page
one,
6.
or, no, I think it's in
This
the
one.
next slide, slide 6.
There you go.
So, I guess, do you have an approximate number what this is gonna cost our district?
We have 22 people. If everyone worked till age 65, which obviously you don't know, that's a determining factor. You don't know their present age, because if they're 57, working 8 more years, they theoretically could drop 80 more days in there at 130 per. It really boils down to how many total days will they have in their bank. They're likely not a perfect score for 8 consecutive years and not get 80, but they could have 50, 60 times 130. That is a number, and here's why I believe we are sitting here having this conversation. It is directly connected to budget. Absolutely connected. This is not sustainable to pay at this rate in comparison to what our neighbors are paying. They're paying much less for a reason. I mean, that's reality. Do we want to be fair to our district employees? Yes, absolutely. I think this is maybe too fair. This is on a really, really high number in comparison to where our neighbors are at. Now, there is a logic out there. What does the rest of the retirement plan look like in these districts? Having had conversations with many of them, this is the retirement plan. Beyond what you choose to do yourself in a 403B, and beyond WRS, which is contracted by law, everyone has to pay in the same percentage everywhere in the state of
And
Wisconsin.
the 403B is the deferred comp?
Yep, they're deferred comp or 457. Those are both deferred comp plans where you contribute your money to that and it grows over time.
And then on top of Wisconsin State retirement at what stage for teachers?
What's that?
What is the age that teachers get to take retirement?
Well,
Wisconsin
for here,
State retirement.
it would be changing to 55. The WRS system is also 55, but there's a lot of factors that play into that.
Right.
And then, right now, all new teachers get $2,000
Well,
into an
there are two
HSA.
different plans. Let me go through it in short form. The older plan, which is 22 people again, every year after their post-employment, every year up to the age of 65, because then you're on Uncle Sam's tab for health insurance, you get $9,000 paid to you in addition to whatever your sick day payout is. That's the old retirement plan. The new retirement plan is this. Each and every year that you work in the district, you get $2,000. At the 10th year of employment, you get a $5,500 kicker. At the 15th year, you get another $5,500 kicker. And you get paid as you go. Every 50 days you get paid $2,000 into your HRA. So you get paid as you go. The reason the district made that change some 15, 20 years ago is the old retirement plan became an unfunded liability. You didn't know what your budget was going to need to look like because you didn't know how many people were going to be retiring. In the new system, you pay as you go, so then you can budget it because you know who you have here now. So that's the big difference. Is this sustainable? You can do anything you want with the budget, but what don't you do? We want to compensate our staff, certainly, but this seems very disproportionate with where the rest of the CISA is at. And that's what I've said to each of the staffs. This has been a point of contention. I've received emails about this here in recent days, which is why we're proceeding with, if you take my recommendation, not changing for next year, giving them a heads up for the year after.
What did we
Well,
want?
I think the heads up, I think it would be maybe a little unfair to change it for next year, but right now, they're getting a heads up, and looking at these numbers, we're not, nobody is even close to us.
Not at 200 days, no.
And so, it's probably something, to be fair, to be a potential item to look at down the road, 2, 3, 4 years down the road.
But if you could humor me for a moment, I'd like to spend a couple of minutes on that sub-pay over time slide. The sub-rate history. The logic that's been given is we've been counting on 130 all this time, and now you're changing it. That, to me, indicates you haven't been counting on 130 because it hasn't been on 130 until this year.
Right.
If anything, you were counting on 90 because it was that for the 20 years that you see on the screen. Because we know it goes back to 2001 with Char, so it's at least 14 years. So if you come in at 100, you're still ahead by $10. For 200 days, it's still $2,000 ahead. So I think the logic is faulty to say we've been counting on this. Is that what the language presently is? Yes. But it's only been something other than 90 in the last 8 years. And this will continue to go up. We'll be here again talking about subpay. Everyone else will be too.
Yeah, I think, even Dale and I have sat in with the negotiations or kind of listening sessions the last few years, and the retirement always seems to be a hot topic. Health insurance benefits wise, money going in wise, there always seems to be some compromises that are done kind of there before we get to this part of it. So I think this isn't like totally off base to anybody that's been in, the negotiations. Jessica, these guys go back and then they tell the teachers kind of what has come out of these meetings, and so there's been talk about this, that it's not financially sustainable. This isn't terribly new. So I think, again, following the recommendation that this year we leave it, and then a heads up that we have to do something, because you want to retain staff that's here and put your budget to the people that are here too, and not just funding retirements either. So it's been an ongoing conversation for at least 3 years, so.
The district's position is that the district is not responsible to fund your retirement. We want to help you have a premium paid for in retirement, but you're responsible for your retirement with your 403B, and you're automatically responsible by the WRS, which, again, you don't even see it being taken out of your check unless you look at your check stub, because it automatically, by law, needs to come out from your check, and the district pays in the same. 13% of every single check adds up over time. That is the portion of your retirement that matters the most, not anything we do in addition. I think where we were at was near the last slide, if not the last slide. That's okay.
That's a
Becky-
good question, because,
Becky can fly through
historically,
this.
Joe, that has happened in this district. I mean, back in like 2000, 2001, this district was, I don't know, were you on the board back then?
Well, maybe.
They were offering, payouts for teachers to go early because it was such a
That was-
financial impact to the district.
That was as recent as like 2008, 9,
Yeah.
that there were payouts for folks. And then that was phased out from 10,000, 8,000, 6,000, 4,000, 2,000, and nothing. I think I have that right, Jessica? That's like
So,
10
it's a
years
good
ago.
question, because
ish.
it's historically put us in
You
situations.
know, those payouts, while it was money to maybe spend that we didn't necessarily need to or have to, but it was there for a long time, and the theory was that, somebody retiring at the top of the pay scale might be replaced by a new teacher saving, $20,000, $30,000. So you pay somebody 10 to leave, and you hire somebody for $20,000 or $30,000 less. So, back then, mid-2000s, we saved money when somebody retired,
And they
And
weren't
even when paying them out.
They weren't keeping accruing days then either, and then at that
Yeah,
high
so-
salary
And
level
that's
too,
happening
so-
now. People are retiring out at 75 and coming in, as you see on the screen, at 41,750. That's a whole different price point. And we are hiring folks in at A1, and if you want proof of that, just go to the elementary school. I never feel older on any given day than when I go to the elementary school, because holy cow. Like, some of them are former students. I'm like, oh, man, I'm getting old. So, this is the actual document. This is the certified staff compensation and benefits document. So you're going to see the formal version of what you just saw in PowerPoint. The year pushed forward here, there's no yellow in any of the numbers, but that's not because we don't want there to be yellow. We do, but we just don't know what we're going to do with that yet. And Shar and Joe, you got a snapshot of that when we went to the CISA deal Thursday before Easter. The state has not sorted out their affairs. I know it would make sense that on January 1 of 2023, you'd have your 23 to 25 biennium budget. Well, that's not the way government works, and if you want to have that conversation, maybe we could all share some thoughts on that. They don't have a budget yet, and we don't know what we're getting. But when we do know, then we'll know what we're
So
gonna
we
do.
have what our desired salary.
Yeah,
schedule
our
is.
desire is not the scale that you saw, but the scale that you saw on the
The blue.
PowerPoint to move forward in the next year. It can be October. I'm hopeful that it's not. Hopefully it'll be May, June, or July, that would be better, but I don't know. There's been a lot of politics happening in Madison and Wisconsin, if you didn't know. They're after each other about stuff. These are word changes. Certified staff may accumulate PDH. We simply made word changes to PTO. The deductions in payroll, we changed it to director of personnel. The payroll language, no guarantee it's gonna be there at 12:01, it's just gotta be there that day. Summer school compensation, we simply did a word change, certified staff who teach summer school, still $30. Health savings account, made a word change, added a prorated amount for a part-time employee. If you're getting a contribution, you're not a full-time employee, you wouldn't get the full contribution, you'd get a prorated amount of that contribution. Workers' compensation, again, director of personnel, and then some word changes will assist the employee in filling out workers' comp form if necessary. Twyla does it all the time. It's helpful if she helps because she knows what she's doing and it needs to be done right. Retirement post-employment benefits, as of July 1, 2023, all days of accrued sick leave will become accrued paid time off and placed in the PTO retirement bank. The conversion is sick days to PTO days, 1 for 1. You have 1 sick day as 1 PTO. You don't lose any in the transition. It just becomes called something else. Age of vested in retirement is 55 as opposed to 56. Certified staff members must notify the district of their intent to retire by March 1st of this year if they plan to retire, unless an exception is granted by the district administrator. The exception's gonna have to be a pretty serious deal, and we've had one exemption this year, and it's been a pretty serious deal, so that exemption was granted. You'll see 55 here a lot, 56 to 55. The language that you see in paragraph number 4, that yellow, is a reflection of the 130 to 100, and then half of that the year that follows. Again, a bunch more 55s and a couple of 10s, 10 being the vested in number, and 55 the vested in age. There is a 5 there, that's for an HRA eligible employee if they pass. If they've been here for 5 years, their IRS dependent then becomes vested in, and they can draw upon the dollars that were earned in that time. This is a clause that we put in some 7-8 years ago with the death of a staff member. So you'll see that again in the next paragraph, changing it from 10 to 5. Paid time off is a word change there. Example, 360 PTO and would be paid at $2,000 at the 50-day level. You total out at $14,000. So this is in the new retirement system. You get paid for every 50 days, and you get paid over the course of that time. So if you get paid 7 times at $2,000, you get $14,000. That's the example. Wisconsin retirement system employers and employees are each required to pay 1/2 of the actuarial required contributions. Right now, 6.55% is what that number is. Paid time off, what you see there in that big old gray paragraph is exactly what you saw in the PowerPoint. I'm not sure if you want me to go through each of the paragraphs, but it states what we've just went through. Bereavement leave is literally word for word what you just saw. Personal days wouldn't exist anymore, sick days wouldn't exist anymore, emergency days wouldn't exist anymore. PDH trade is exactly what you just saw. FMLA, a couple of word changes here. The FMLA and Wisconsin Family Medical Leave Act provides certain employees with up to 12 weeks unpaid job-protected leave per year. They also require that the employee group health benefits be maintained during that leave. That is word change suggestion from J.A. Counter, our third-party administrator on health insurance. That FMLA language is then obsolete, so it's been stricken, so to speak. Remote learning is exactly what you saw. The emergency conditions clause there, it said weather conditions affecting only ability to commute will generally not be considered a reason for closing a facility. That's just not what we do anymore. We're doing a whole different thing. And then it says there that we'll make them up at the end of the year, and I don't think anyone here wants to make them up at the end of the year. If it's 82 in April, what's it gonna be, 160 in June? Hope not. Workday appointment language is the same. You've already seen that in the PowerPoint. Leave without pay is the same. Leave of absence, this is different than leave without pay. Leave of absence is you're simply choosing to leave your job with district permission to do so, but there's no guarantee you'll get your job back when you return. It's usually been for a study abroad or some other venture. It's only happened twice in my 17 years here, so it's not a very frequent thing. Employee absences and substitutes. This is the sub language, this is the sub plan language that you saw before. And that's the end of that document. And I'll take any feedback you may have, comments, questions, or otherwise.
Any hit list of what the major concerns are from employees, or what, anything good that anybody had to say?
The concerns about the document we just went through?
Yeah.
Here would be my highlighted few that were the biggest concerns at the beginning. Having to report for remote instruction, that was a point of contention, loudly and clearly. The 130 becoming 100, that's been a point of contention, pretty loud and clear. The 56 to 55, there was a narrative that got branded there that the district was pushing folks to retire early. We were trying to get rid of the old folks, but that was, and there's 3 people here in the room that were on the retirement committee, that was the certified staff's recommendation to do that, not ours. It really doesn't matter to me. It is illogical to say 56 when WRS is 55, so.
Yeah, that was just kind of a lining up language.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, there was never an ambition. I mean, if folks want to work till 70, then work till 70 if they truly want to. Why would we not want them to be here? If they've worked that long, they got to be pretty good at it by now. So those would be the big highlighted concerns. Maybe these folks have others that they've heard, but those are the big ones that I've heard.
Any good feedback?
I think folks have come around on the idea that I'm not going to run out of days. I'm not going to have to be running to the doctor because we're not going to get past 10. If I got a crazy scenario where I'm bringing my kid to daycare and then they throw up and it's a day of in-service and now what am I going to do? We'll work with you. I mean, that happens. It's life. I think they love not having to ever be asked anymore about what the day is about. I don't think they want to pay for their personal days anymore. So I think those have been all positives that folks have shared to me and that I've heard from others. I don't hear a lot of feedback at this point, other than the 130 to 100. That really is the only thing I'm hearing anything about right now.
And our reps seem to agree with that?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
So that is the certified staff version of compensation and benefits. The fun doesn't end there. This is the handbook. There's less changes. It's less exciting. A couple little word changes. People have come and people have gone. Word change there, we simply changed it in the named grade level shall be void. It used to say in the named school. It's just clearer to say grade level. This is for employee identification badges, provide employee and a guest the complimentary access to home athletic events. It just is a guest, or your spouse perhaps, or whoever it is. We spell out what WECAN is, because not everyone lives the educator world. We like acronyms in education. Wisconsin Education Center Career Access Network. So that we post it fairly regularly. Becky sends out, here are the latest and greatest job availability in the district. That goes out every, I don't know, once a month maybe, a couple weeks. Depends how busy Becky is. Depends how many things I put in her basket.
And how urgent we need to find someone.
How urgent we need to find someone. If you send it out multiple times in one day, we'll know. You better read this. Faculty travel, car travel in districts shall be reimbursed at the latest IRS rate. And if the truth be told, it is more hassle in the district office to be authoring checks for $4.38 than it's worth. I think it's a fairly unreasonable request to be reimbursed to drive from the elementary school to the intermediate school. I mean, that's just me, so we've stopped doing that. That was that item. Job vacancies, again, we post them on WECAN. Maintenance requests, custodial work orders is the way we go. We don't have forms. You go on the computer and type it in. It's true in maintenance, just like it is in IT. If you don't turn in a work order, it does not exist. They follow work orders, so that's what we have there. Personal vehicles and district vehicles. This is important because this is insurance language. Employees must notify and receive approval from the building principal or immediate supervisor before using a personal vehicle to transport themselves or other staff to or from a district activity. And then at the next page down, you'll see employees are prohibited from transporting students in personal vehicles for school activities. Employees who wish to transport students in district vehicles for district events and activities must contact the district office to become an approved driver. The employee must present a valid driver's license and agree to a driving record check. Staff drivers must be pre-approved each school year. This is an insurance item, and if we don't follow this and something happens, we would have a big problem. So that's what's been recommended to us.
What happens if we don't have a school vehicle available for transport of students?
Then you're not going. You gotta schedule it in advance. We can't be putting people in personal vehicles. That's what the law says.
Or
Or you say-
parents have to transport
You're
their own children?
transporting
Say
your own
you're
child.
responsible for your own
Okay.
transportation.
And we don't wanna do that, which is the organized, it's good. An emergency, a disorganization on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine. Get it in. You know, if you're a coach or an advisor, you know your activities way in advance. Get them on the docket.
Kinda, sorta, sometimes, right?
Most times you would.
I mean, cause like if you're advancing to another level that you didn't know,
No.
but you would put in for it, I would assume planning on advancing to that level, and then if it didn't happen, then it just wasn't, it's just a scratch on the
No.
vehicle, okay.
Summer school assignments, certified staff compensation benefits, we just simply changed the words there, it's what it's called. Vaping, Board of Education recognizes that the use of tobacco and vaping products has been shown to be linked to illnesses and disability, and the use of tobacco and vaping products is particularly addictive to children and youth. Therefore, in compliance with state law, the following policy on smoking and the use of tobacco and vaping products is adopted. No official or staff member shall take action that might encourage a student to smoke or otherwise use tobacco or vaping products. There will be no smoking or other use of tobacco or vaping products by students, staff, or visitors, and that includes our outdoor fields and facilities as well. That's the rule we have for everybody. It would be a rule we would follow too, and it is, after all, state law. So vaping is just the new language that we put in there until they come up with some other new way to engage in life, but that's where we're at. Vacancies and transfers, just crossed out the words during the summer, put in we can once again, because that's where we put our jobs. Wages and other forms of compensation, change the title to Certified Staff Compensation and Benefits Guide, because that is, again, what it's called. And then the date change at the bottom there, of April 17th, which is Monday. Any questions or comments about the staff handbook?
I guess my only question is, under faculty travel, I understand car travel in the district, shall be reimbursed, and that's crossed off. But it says travel outside of the district must have prior administrative approval. So I'm assuming that's like if you're going to training at CISA or
Yep.
something like that.
That'd be a sub request, you put that in, we know where you are. I mean, because when the sub request happens, it's in, I think, 4 parts. You get one, the office gets one, the district office gets one, maybe it's 3 parts. Pam gets one. So everyone,
No.
and the building principal is signing it typically, so you'll know in advance if
So
someone's leaving.
that's specifically travel if you're traveling for work-related.
Because sometimes folks use school vehicle to go up to CISA or something further away. Like the ever-pleasing federal funding convention, you gotta drive in luxury to something as fun as that. I'm kidding. When I hear federal funding, I don't get too excited. And it probably wasn't.
Twyla and I enjoyed that conference.
Okay, now support staff, it mirrors some of what you've already seen, but it is different living because it's a different deal altogether and construct of the workday. This is the present state of affairs for the salary scale. It's not yellow. It is yellow in theory, but we can't do anything with it until we know more from the state. There is some dramatic changes that we would like to make to this. A couple of changes I can highlight now, we would remove mechanic and IT off of here because we only have a couple of people that are mechanic and IT. I don't work the world of mechanic, that I imagine if you are an entry-level mechanic, you are not going to be making $18 an hour anywhere. So it just doesn't fit. And you're probably not making that in IT either. The other big change is to change the number of levels so we don't tie this to anniversary date. The anniversary date is the date at which you move forward. And right now, Becky and Twyla are having to keep an independent tab, so to speak, on what everyone's anniversary date is. We want to get that off the table so it's easier to do. And then the bus driver scale, which was just moved forward, we would like to continue to take a look at that as well. Remember the big change that was made here, entry level, level 1, in year number 20 bus driver, we're making the exact same wage. And that didn't seem right at all, so we made that change. And the other change was the meal and reimbursement was moved from 6 to 12. I don't know where you would go for fast food to get a meal for $6. I don't know. Maybe you have an idea, but I'm thinking probably not.
I don't know, Quick Trip seems really popular.
Quick Trip for $6, I don't know. They got good roasted chicken, but I'm not sure $6 will cut it. It might cost you a couple more. All right, deductions and payroll, Director of Personnel, is what the title is, payroll dates, don't sit by your computer waiting. Temporary summer employees who have worked 5 workdays immediately preceding and 5 workdays immediately following the 4th of July holiday will be paid for that holiday at their normal summer workday wage. I asked Twyla about this clause, and if Twyla looks at me and says, I have no idea what that means, I've never followed that, it's probably time to get rid of it. She has no idea what that means, and neither do I. And I don't even know what's
The
there.
custodial staff wasn't very happy about that clause there, so,
It's gone.
okay.
Health savings account, change it to a prorated amount for a less than full-time employee. Workers' compensation, changed it to director of personnel. Reimbursement. Compensation for training time may be provided in the form of wages or in professional development hours. Sometimes we do one, sometimes we do the other, but we needed to clear this up, that the compensation is for real and accrued costs such as their meals, their lodging, their mileage, and registration fees. It doesn't mean if you end up going to CISA for 8 hours that there's anything else included. Or it doesn't mean if you go to the Wisconsin Dells for something that you get paid 24 hours a day for your wage. You'll still get paid, but we'll also cover your meals, your lodging, your mileage, and your registration fees. Simply trying to make that more clear. Changing the vested in to 15 as opposed to 10 as opposed to 15, changing it to PTO. We should probably highlight the uniform one, we probably missed that one. So uniforms, this was a request of support staff, and I'll read that paragraph to you. Employees working in school nutrition and custodial departments will be provided with work shirts that are to be worn when on duty. That's what already exists in the handbook. Employees must notify their immediate supervisor if a shirt is damaged and needs to be replaced. That's already there. After 1 year, this is new, after 1 year of employment, staff who work primarily outdoors to perform their duties are eligible for a stipend of up to $100 for winter attire. The stipend amount may be prorated based on the time spent outdoors. Employees requesting this stipend must submit a written request to their immediate supervisor for approval by their supervisor and the district administrator. Paula and Jessica here have perfect examples of folks that spend a lot of time outside. They have playground aids that are outside more than they're inside. And that they're gonna need the right winter attire to make that happen. This was a request of the support staff, folks that work that area. And this is a recommendation that we add this language. And again, this, you're not voting on this here this evening. But if you have any feedback on that language, I'd be happy to hear it.
I think we brought this up last time, but approximately how many people are we talking about?
You're probably talking about 12 to 24, because you're including custodial in that. If they're working snow removal, they could be outside for a big part of the day. That's where this started, was custodial. You could have some clubhouse folks that can make that argument, and you could have some folks that work playground duty that can make that argument. Just trying to work with those people. It doesn't apply to most support staff. Kitchen staff's not outside, bus drivers aren't outside.
So it could be $1,000 a year,
Could be.
yeah.
And they have to make that
Seems-
request.
Is it every year or is it just once after their first year?
After their first year, they can make that request.
And it's-
Maybe we should clear that up and make sure it's,
I mean, it says after 1 year of employment,
Yep.
then they can,
Good
they're
catch.
eligible for the stipend. So is that just one time? Or is that every year?
I think we need to determine what it is. That's a good catch. You're right, because that's a difference. It is certainly.
Yeah, we talked about that in our
We did.
meeting, negotiation meeting. How often does that happen?
Do you have a preference? If it's an every year, or it's
I mean,
5
for
years, or
reading
10
this,
years,
I thought it was a
or
one-time. I don't
once? I
know.
mean, whatever it is.
I
When
don't-
we
I
talked
mean-
about it, I think, we didn't think it should be every year,
Yeah.
but, you could wear out
A pair of boots or
winter
a coat or.
clothes if you're out shoveling for 2 hours
So
a day
should
or
it be
whatever, so
after the
maybe
first year and
every,
then after every 5 years
I don't
after
know,
that or
maybe
something?
3 years or 5.
Seems
Yeah, I don't know.
reasonable. Joe, you're smiling?
I get a $650 a year, every year.
For winter gear?
A pair of pants are $75 right now.
Okay.
If it's like law enforcement. A pair of boots, I mean, Danners are like $350.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, so $100 isn't, in my mind, isn't necessarily
So perhaps every year is in order?
out of line,
And
yeah.
I don't know, I drive past Carrie Culzer every morning and I wanna go buy her boots by myself. Cause she's there every morning, snow or rain or summer, sun or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Joe, I mean, boots aren't cheap. I mean, even for like, me, I'm outdoors all the time in the winter, and if you're gonna wear a pair of muck boots or something that's waterproof, they're $130, $140 a pair, just for short ones. So, I mean, would I mind seeing it yearly? Because even if those boots last you a couple of years, maybe you need to replace a jacket, and it's not like we're paying our support staff an exorbitant amount of money that's breaking the bank, that they can afford to subsidize the school district for their job, so.
You can simply put in there a yearly $100. It's fine, that's what I'm hearing you say. I'll bring that on Monday as yearly. Wisconsin Retirement System added the word each. They each need to contribute. PTO language is slightly different in that it is support staff as opposed to certified staff. So let's walk through this. Support staff are required to work a specific number of days each school year. These days of required work include days when there is school and may include days when there is not school. It is the expectation of the School District of Amery that by signing a letter of appointment, support staff are agreeing to work each required day at work, and failure to do so is a breach of the letter of appointment. The district acknowledges that it must account for days of employee and employee family member sickness. Further, the district understands that employees have other personal obligations which cannot be reasonably accounted for outside of the school day. Therefore, each support staff member is granted the use of PTO, paid time off, to account for all absences from work. As of July 1, 2023, all days of accrued personal leave time would become PTO, paid time off. The conversion would be 1-to-1. Each employee will start the year with the balance of PTO remaining from the previous year and will earn, upon completion of each month of work, 1 additional PTO. They work a month, they get a day. That's the way it's set up right now. A 9-month employee would be able to earn 9 days per year, and a 12-month would earn 12. Beginning July 1 and ending June 30th the following year, PTO balances carry over from year to year. Part-time employees will receive paid time off on a prorated basis. Some don't work as long as others. And on the number of hours they are scheduled to work, PTO can be used at any time in conjunction with FMLA or short-term or long-term disability. Employees may not use more than their number of PTO days that have been earned. An absence with no PTO available requires special supervisor and/or district administrator approval and may require a doctor's note. Unapproved absences will be treated as a day of leave without pay and are subject to the conditions outlined under the without pay section of this guide. If the doctor's note is required, the employee has 1 week to provide that doctor's note, or it becomes a leave without pay. We're almost there. Requests for PTO must be submitted through the request for leave report of absence form. Handbook language will determine how staff are paid PTO in retirement. The district administrator has the right to approve or deny requests for PTO. So it looks a little bit different than certified staff, but it does mirror the same kinds of principles. Questions or comments?
What constitutes a month? 28 days, 30 days, a calendar month? What's a month?
I believe Twyla uses calendar month.
Okay. And so what if you get hired on in the middle of that month? Is that prorated then, or how does that work?
I believe it's prorated. Is that accurate? you think?
I believe so. I think if you're here for half the month or more, she will give you a whole one generally for that month.
So you couldn't come on
Like about
February
common.
28th? Oh,
I think you actually get the first of the month based on my experience.
First of the
So
month.
if I
That's
was
what you
hired
get.
on November 27th, for example, I did not have a day until December 1st.
there you go.
And we just went through that with our new hire.
Yeah, I think if
Because
you get
we had
hired like
some days that
mid-month,
were
you might.
correct. She
You wouldn't
didn't
have a
Until
d-
the 1st of March.
If you, okay, so if you were hired November 27th, you wouldn't have a personal day you said, or you wouldn't have a day until December 1st, but that couldn't be correct, right? Because you have to work the month before you get the day. So wouldn't it be January 1 then?
How about I'll find out from Twyla and I'll answer that question on
Yeah.
Monday?
Well,
'Cause
and that's what
don't
I was
wanna
gonna
guess.
ask that too, as far as like, if you get hired,
No.
even to start September 1 or whatever the beginning of the school year is, then you don't technically have a day until October 1, according to
Right.
this language. So do you get assigned it at the beginning of, I mean, I understand we want them to
Right.
work and earn those days and not, you know, but I also think if you start and you don't have anything, then what happens when you get sick in the month of September?
Right.
We did just have that with those snow days.
It
We had
happens.
an employee who was hired mid-month February. We had a day. She did not have a day until March 1st. Do you remember what I'm talking about? We literally just went through it.
But it doesn't necessarily, I mean, you might have to take that day without pay, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you would lose your job or anything
No.
over that.
No. It's a matter of circumstance.
Right.
Yep.
It's
But
reality.
it just might not be paid, just like
Right.
other jobs in the world that if you didn't come to work, you didn't get paid.
Alright.
Your pay time off? You do?
So you have to work it before you use it.
For you?
All right,
Not for
moving to the next part.
Yeah. Wow.
An employee who, this is a addition, an employee who resigns from their position or retires will be paid for their accrued vacation days. An employee who is terminated will forfeit their vacation days. This is, we've sought legal guidance on this, and this is what we've been told. In order to be able to do one or the other, you have to put it in writing. Once you put it in writing, then it's set, but it is your choice. If you don't have something in writing, then they absolutely have to be paid for their vacation days, even if they were terminated. So if someone was terminated this year, they are subject to being paid out their PLT, and that's what we've done. But this says something different. We're choosing. If we have to terminate them, I don't know why we would be paying them for their vacation days. PDH day trades look similar to the certified staff handbook. It's literally, you earn the days and then you can take some time off. So that first paragraph, support staff may trade their earned professional development for up to 2 additional days. 20 gets you, well, this would be easier. Staff who are scheduled to work 7 or more hours per day can trade 20 PDH for 1 day of paid time off, 10 for a half day. PDH trade days are used in increments of no less than a half. Staff who are scheduled to work less than 8 hours per day may have a prorated amount of PDH required for a day trade, because not everyone works a 7-hour day, some work less. PDH is required for PDH trade must be earned before I use them. PDH trade cannot be used the day prior to or after the scheduled breaks in February, March, April, and May. Requests for PDH must be through the request form, and the district administrator has the right to approve or deny all requests for PDH.
So I guess I'm kind of wondering what else would they use a PDH for? Because certified staff, it obviously affects their pay scale.
Yep, certified staff can cash it in for movement on the pay scale, or they can use it for a day trade.
Right.
The only thing that support staff really use it for is a day trade, to have another day off.
Okay. And they would earn PDHs probably in similar fashion to certified
Mhm.
staff, but by attending
Yep.
either in services
Yes.
or by attending training
Yep.
that they've either been required to or that they elect to?
Sure, yes. I mean, there are great valuable opportunities for paras, for instance, that are working in academic environments. You're talking about how to regulate kids. A para's gonna be there on the scene quicker than a certified staff person in some scenarios. A good para is worth their weight in gold.
Yes.
Jessica can attest to this. We'll talk more about that on Monday when Eileen retires, but, yes, a good para is like having another teacher in the room. Absolutely.
I have one other thing,
Go
this
ahead.
is going back, but I noticed that on the previous page, under retirement or separation of employment, it says, in the case of a separation of employment due to a resignation or termination, the employee will forfeit their PTO days, so that does not match what we just read at the top of page 7.
And we have to make that match, certainly. Good catch.
Just, no.
Actually, this is how we're executing it now, and I guess we can talk with Twyla about why that is, but she executes it this way currently. The vacation is paid, I believe, because it's kind of a longevity benefit that they get for being in the district for a period of time, and we've been paying that out, but not the PTO. So we can have a conversation about that, but that is how it's executed currently in the district.
I'm sorry, I kind of lost you.
Yeah, we'll have to have her explain on Monday.
Okay.
I think she'll be here Monday, and we'll have her speak to that.
I'll talk to you about that tomorrow and give her a
Yeah.
heads up for an explanation for that on Monday. That
Okay.
is a good catch though, because it clearly is different. That is true.
So when you talk about being paid for their accrued vacation days, do you want to put anything in there about the rate? Is it by their pay, current pay? Or is it by something
The
else?
PTO payout is based on their rate of pay.
Okay.
Keep us saying, should we state that?
That's
Yeah, we
what I
could,
wondered,
sure.
because it
Yep.
just kind of left you hanging there. It says
Extra clear
should be
sounds good to
paid.
me.
Yeah.
In the document that we got at the board meeting, for paid time off, as long as we're back there again, there was a statement that no more than 5 PTO requests will be approved for a day. PTO days will be granted in the order they received. A doctor's note will be required for every PTO request beyond the 5th request. Was that language just completely dropped in this, or did I miss it somewhere in this new
Well, we
document?
changed it to 10 if you're talking certified staff.
No, nope, I'm
No,
talking
sir.
still support
I don't know
staff.
if you remember, Sean, we had it for support
Yep.
staff and talked about how difficult it would be.
We
to
dropped it all
execute
together.
Because we've got different supervisors that manage their own subs and, you know, on any given day, I don't really know, Pam doesn't know who's gone in the kitchen, who's gone for custodian, she only deals with paras, and it's just kind of fragmented.
I guess that's
So
why
it's a
my
little
question
difficult
was,
to
yeah,
track,
like,
yeah.
was it across all of the, you know,
Yeah.
the genres?
Yeah,
of-
I think it's impossible to track now that we've looked at it, so we
Okay.
just dropped it.
Okay, so that was what I was wondering, where that went, okay.
Family Medical Leave Act, that was the same change as you saw before. Then we struck out the old language, same as we did before. Inclement weather and remote learning days, all custodians are expected to report to work on inclement weather remote learning days. All other support staff are not expected to report. Support staff who do not report for part or all of an inclement weather remote day and wish to be paid must use a PTO. The reason custodians are here and no one else is we have snow removal. Our contracted service clears our parking lots. They don't clear our sidewalks and our walks up to school, and someone needs to do that because we're gonna have school rather soon, so custodians take care of that. So that was a conversation I had with George yesterday and today, and custodians would report, no one else would be obligated to do so.
Now, did our support staff used to get 1 day if it was a snow day paid, that they didn't have to take a PTO
If they're
for?
not, if they're not here, they have to use a PLT to get paid PTO in this system. That's
Did they
now.
used to just get a free one, though?
If they were given one, yes, but typically not.
Okay.
Like when we had the polar vortex, what was that, 5, 6, 7 years ago, that crazy batch of weather at the end of January? It was uncharted waters and we gave them that opportunity. We did that again this year as well and paid them for not being here. It was just so many days because they have to use a PLT, whereas certified staff don't.
Okay. So that was kind of just a case by
Nope,
case
it
basis?
is.
Okay.
It is. Emergency conditions, we could have a situation where we're closed. We had that. I mean, let's talk March of 2020, we were closed. That wasn't our call. So we have that phrase or clause still in there. Workday appointments, employees must use a PTO half or full day when they are not able to be at work due to an appointment. However, an employee has an appointment 30 minutes or less in length at the beginning or end of their shift, we would allow them to do that. They simply need to get permission to do that. That's in essence what that language says.
So, sorry, can we go back?
Sure.
I'm sorry if I'm slow. Where it says, support staff who do not report for part or all of an inclement weather or remote learning day and wish to be paid must use PTO.
Yes.
I feel like that doesn't jive very well with the sentence before it, that they're not expected to report. I feel like maybe we should just say, all other support staff are not expected to report. However, if they wish to be paid for an inclement weather or remote learning day, they must use PTO. Do you know what
We
I'm
could
saying?
clarify the language, certainly. Well, we're just trying to say there is custodians that are gonna report and no one else does, but if you're not here, you gotta use a PTO if you wanna
Right.
be paid.
It just,
But a custodian can have the option of taking a PTO day if they want to. They're expected to report, but they can take a PTO day.
Because
so
the
that's a
standing,
little bit of reason
the
to-
standing rule is that all custodians will report when there is a no-school day. But George said to me this morning, it happens every single time. As soon as I make that call, I get 3 or 4, I'm using a PTO today, or PLT, and they don't come.
yeah,
They have that prerogative if they want to.
yeah. No, I
And
just,
some will come a partial day too, they'll come
Right.
a part of the day when they
Right.
can get here.
Right.
George doesn't want them out in dangerous situations, so it may be a
Right.
partial day too.
I just felt like those two sentences don't match, and not really necessarily about custodians, but about the other support staff. You're not expected to report, and then it says, but if you don't report, we just said you're not expected to report, so.
I like clear better than unclear, so let's make it clear. Good suggestion. Workday appointments, we covered that one. We're on leave without pay. Leave without pay language, in essence, boils down to that number 1, number 2, and number 3. If you're out of days and you're not coming, you're eventually gonna end up being terminated. We have staff in the last 2 years, absolutely would have been terminated if we would have had this clause language in place. Some folks got very comfortable not coming to work during the days of COVID, and that has not left in some cases. We need them to be here. Leave of absence, I don't know that we've ever had a leave of absence that's not an FMLA thing for a support staff person, but if the language is in there for certified staff, we should allow it to be there for support staff as well. I'm not sure what kind of a circumstance would exist, but we could entertain that if in fact that arises. Employee absence and substitutes, it is the responsibility of the employee to notify the supervisor and the district's designated sub-caller. The first call is to the supervisor. If Ryan's down a bus driver, that's the very first call that they need to make, because we gotta get a bus driver. And then Pam after that to account for it, because Ryan's finding the driver, not Pam. And then the language, or the date there at the end. Any other comments or questions? The last document is the handbook. Date change at the top right. Couple name changes there on the first page. Appointments during the workday, we got rid of this section, we put it in the comp and benefits document, we just saw that, we just moved it out of here, so that's why it's crossed off. Departments, this language is just obsolete, we don't really have departments the way they're defined here, there's really no point to this language, so we crossed it off. Guest complimentary pass for attendance at events. Extracurricular assignments, crossed off the language, under no circumstances shall a board member work as a coach, assistant coach, advisor, or assistant advisor to extracurricular activities on either a paid or a volunteer basis. I'm not sure the last board member that coached or advised. We're still looking for bus drivers if you want to drive bus. But I don't know.
Only on snow days.
Only on snow days, okay. It just, I don't know what
This
the point
language
of it is.
didn't match those certified guides, we
Didn't.
just made it match so they read the same way.
Yeah. Weekend's what we call it, so we've changed it to weekend. In-services and workshops and training support staff shall attend the all-school in-service day prior to the first day of school, plus any additional in-service days that week as directed by the supervisor. There's 3 days that first week, typically they're here for 2 of them, In some cases, they might even be here for 3, because the circumstance is they're busy in meetings, they can't ever work with their paras, and then they never get a time to be together. So we want to be flexible about that. Job vacancies and postings, we regularly post them when we put them, or send them out to everyone, and we put them on weekend. Maintenance requests doesn't exist unless you put in an online work order. Personal vehicles, same exact language as you saw before. Salary schedule, the basic salaries of most employees covered by this handbook can be found in the support staff compensation and benefits guide. It's literally on the first page of that guide. Staff travel, same clause was canceled. Time clocks, we don't use time clocks anymore, so we got rid of that. The vaping language is there. Tracking hours worked, support staff are expected to track their hours in Skyward, which is the computer system, or a time clock if available, but everyone's in Skyward. In some instances, a proper time sheet is also acceptable if approved by a supervisor. We're trying to get away from paper, because when you got paper, you tend to lose things. In Skyward, it's done. It's a lot easier. And work schedule language, we canceled out that language because we're talking about putting it in Skyward. And April 17th. And that is the last of the 4.
Any hit list on this? Concerns, comments, complaints, good
The
things?
biggest, I think the biggest item that folks were energized about was the remote learning. And if I have to report and they don't have to report, or I reported and they reported, I worked 7 hours and they worked 5 hours, that's not fair. I wanted to make the same amount as them, but I was told to go home. I want to come in and get paid, but I got to use a PLT, but I'm working in the kitchen, and what would I come in for? That whole scorecard surrounding PLT use and remote learning was probably the biggest point of contention, and truthfully, the winter attire clause. And then obviously, always at the top of the list is salary, and your point has been well heated. I know that many of you have said we got to do something to further address the support staff scale. I couldn't agree more. It has to be done. And what you'll see would be a significant increase, but we have to make sure we can budgetarily afford that. So we're in a hurry up and wait scenario right now. We're ready to try and put our plan in action, but we need to know our revenue streams so the state could get on their horse and get moving on that. That would be helpful.
So, as of right now, they're guaranteed the rate of pay
Yep,
for
let me
this
talk.
year, or?
Right, let's talk about that for a moment. So on Monday, you'll have the opportunity to approve contracts. So the natural growth, on a certified staff person, your natural growth is they're a C3 in year 5 or 6 or whatever it is, and they're becoming a D1. We're not waiting on any of that. A person that's a C3, if they've earned the necessary PDH and they're moving forward, they become a D1 and they get that increased salary amount. What we want to do is change that salary scale for certified staff to that 3rd year that proposed, so they would naturally move forward and they'd have that increase in the movement to that 3rd year of growth. We just can't do that second part yet. We can only move them on the natural growth part. Like for instance here, you're moving from C3 at 47,550 to D1 at 50,700. We'll honor all of those, and nearly everyone that can move is moving. Folks don't generally sit. In regards to support staff, if you're now moving into year 5 of employment and you're supposed to move, for instance, you're a para and your wage increases from 1750 to 18, we're gonna honor that movement. They're now in year 5, they should have the opportunity to have that increased pay. What we wanna do is move this whole thing forward, because 1450 isn't competitive. Let's just be honest, and it used to be 1235. It used to be 1350. Those weren't competitive either. So we have to, if we want to hire and retain our people, 1450, 1575 is probably not going to get it done, especially in this job market. So the contracts you'll, if you choose to, approve on Monday. What you'll receive in your red folder is a list of everyone you're approving. It does not have listed their wage, because we don't know what their wage is going to be once we change that budget. But what you're approving is contracts and natural movement. If there is an additional salary, you're gonna see additional salary in all those estimates when that happens. But you're approving contracts. We wanna lock these people in, because if we don't lock them in with contracts and letters of appointment, they'll start scattering to other districts. We gotta lock them in now. That's why we're doing it in April, which is why the state it would be so helpful if we had a budget in a more timely way, so we could do it all at once. We just can't. And staff knows that. I've met with them, and they understand their contract's not gonna reflect anything other than natural growth, because we don't have a budget. So, good question. It just looks a little different logistically than it ordinarily would.
I guess, you know, I wish we could, you know, guarantee some increase for our support staff, besides the natural growth, even though we don't know the budget yet, and maybe we don't.
I don't know
You
that we're
I
in a
just feel like-
position to,
I don't think you can do that without knowing a budget.
yeah, I don't know that we
That's
could
pretty tough.
guarantee anything without knowing our revenue streams.
Yeah.
That would be precarious.
I mean, that'd be like you taking out a mortgage and not knowing if you had a job, or you didn't have a job and you're just hoping to get one. And I don't think the bank would say, we're gonna give you a loan on a house without income.
I mean, I hear what you're saying. I understand that, but I also feel like, you know, we're guaranteeing this price, or this pay, we're guaranteeing, you know, this little bit of movement if you are moving, you know, I don't know, I guess.
Just, I think to answer your question, I'll simply give you a comparison of what other districts are doing. I have a middle border conference superintendent's meeting next Thursday. There isn't a district in that room when we're talking Baldwin and Somerset and St. Croix that's moving anyone forward until they have a budget. Everyone's in a holding pattern, and everyone's waiting. And some are gonna wait all the way into the fall, and then if they have to do the retroactive pay. Our hope, my hope, is that we move forward for everybody. But I could never be in a position where we're guaranteed movement, and then all of a sudden, the state gives us no additional per pupil aid. I mean, Joe was at the meeting and Char was at the meeting. I think that would be a very dangerous move. The state's made some pretty interesting moves here recently.
Well, I mean, just on top of it also is, I think you explained it in the paper also, is when we lose enrollment, it's not a direct hit immediately. But since 2020, I mean, we've lost enrollment, and that number's gonna coming up here.
Sure, because the cuts you're gonna see that are presently happening this year are elementary, intermediate. They will soon become middle and high school, because your 86 4K kids are 86 kids as seniors. Our hundreds are over. The elementary will be in the mid-80s every class, every year. Intermediate, the year after next, will be mid-80 kids every year, forever and ever probably. Then it's middle, and then it's high school. So that hits you 12 times.
And again, this is why, like, when we talked about this, and you guys definitely need to speak up, but like, I mean, teachers are where rubber meets the road to me. But at the same time, where rubber meets the road is we just paid $145,000 on another bus we just ordered, when I would rather have a mechanic wrench on that baby again. And obviously being safe, right? I mean,
Right.
That's me. But I mean, like, I would rather pay for a bus after the fact when we know our budget.
Well, here-
Which is nice, but then you also have to think of like
Bus
$140,000 with a bus. You're getting 20 years out of that bus. So you're looking at that cost of, if you're gonna depreciate it out, of $7,000 a year versus that $145,000 will pay 2 teachers for 1 year.
Yeah, but we're also, like, and I don't know the number of buses either, but I'm just saying, like, a monster hit, like 145 to me, that's a lot of money. But again, I just brought up enrollment, you know, in my class, what do we have, 1,600, you know?
I don't know.
Enrollments, kids around there, now we're gonna be down to 1,200 at some point. Do we need that many buses again, you know?
You'll
so-
need less.
Yeah.
Good news is, and you'll hear this again on Monday, Becky and I were talking about the numbers today, the natural movement of certified staff, just people moving from your C3s to your D1s across the board, we've already staggered it. I hope we've finished nearly all of our hiring. I probably just jinxed it. That is offset by retirements and by the staff reductions that we've made. The 3 staff reductions and retirements put us over 20,000 in the positive. Just on natural growth, we've already covered it. So that's good, and that's with intention to cover
Yeah,
it.
realize I'm not just talking about a bus, I just
Right.
That's an
I
example.
mean, yeah, I
Right.
just,
Right.
But
that
I
was
guess,
in
I
his
just wanted
budget.
to, yeah, I
He
just
has
wanted to
his
clear that
department
too.
budget, and that's what he chose to do.
Your point
in
is well
that
taken,
framework.
Joe. The first things that districts are talking about when they're talking budget are the items that are considered to be extraneous away from the instruction of kids. You're talking IT, you're talking buses, and you're talking any extra maintenance. Those are the first three things that are being put right over here and have a freeze on them. We're not quite in that boat yet, and I don't think we ever will be because we're gonna be smarter than that, but that's the first thing that people say, hold off. They don't start cutting teachers. You can cut teachers all day long, then you're gonna be in trouble, because that is where the rubber meets the road. The best curriculum in the world will fail without a quality teacher to make it happen. We have to save every single person we can here, but there will be some cuts that will have to be made. That's just reality. You can't go from 1,800 kids to 1,200 kids and that not happen. That's just reality. And you'll see numbers on Monday, the schematics of intermediate and elementary. We've talked about it ad nauseum. I hope never to look at it again, but we'll look at it on Monday.
You will be on Monday.
It will be on Monday.
Well, and hopefully the board continues what we did in the past, and Jessica, you can remember, I mean, when we came to the end of the year, I think the one year we sent out checks for 50 or $100, I mean, that's all we had left over, but we gave something because we froze the wages to meet the budgets. But we're still, you know, confident in the staff and trying to give whatever we could at that point. Yeah.
We will be okay if we move forward smartly, and you have to be forward-thinking to move forward smartly. It's not a year-by-year thing. That's why the chart you saw on enrollment went out to 2028. I mean, that's 5 years out on purpose. You had to look that far ahead, because then that hit is traveling through the middle school and on into the high school. I don't know what your class was, Joe, but what it was in 85. It's probably 125 or more.
I know in history, though, we gained students in the middle school area. That was kind of it. I don't know if it's happening anymore, but history back in 10, 15 years ago
We used
was.
to gain as the grade level went up. You know,
Yep,
middle
you would
school,
get back
high
kids from
school.
parochial options. That's not happening anymore.
Yeah,
What you're
you said
seeing
must
now
receive there.
is we've never been up more in enrollment ins, open enrollment ins, but we've never been up more than open enrollments out. So now we're bringing more in, but we're sending even more out. And the places we're sending the more out are two spots. Richmond, because it's geographically, logistically makes sense for their work lives, and virtual school options. Because if you remember, I pointed it out on the screen.
Yep.
I pointed it out to Brad. It was in Brad Mongret, and it was in the room. When they showed the changing enrollment in the state of Wisconsin, the bright yellow spot to our north stayed the whole time. That's Grantsburg
Grantsburg,
virtual.
yeah.
They're up 180%. That's a virtual option. COVID has sent a lot of people virtual, and they haven't come back for everybody. So that's part of the conversation too. I would contend that them being here is the best, most quality education, but that's just me.
More opportunities.
That's just me. Other items for me, suggestions, comments?
I have one more thing just
Yes.
left hanging out there from our listening sessions that we attended. In regards to support staff, there was questions about the custodial responsibility for a bomb threat situation. Was that ever shorn up?
It
in their
was, the
language?
language, I think the language was being misunderstood. There's nothing in the language or the plan that indicates that we want custodians to be the point person on searching for a detonated device. They have the keys that gets them into the spots that then need to be searched for. And the building principal may not even be that. And Joe has a lot more experience on this than I ever could. The last bomb threat we had here, prior to the robocall bomb threats, an actual physically one declared here on campus, the ATF came from the cities. I'm not trained in searching, looking for bombs, and nor are any other administrator around here. And certainly custodians aren't either. They
And-
just had the keys to get in the room.
Right, so I guess I think their question was, do they have to take them physically to building by building with the keys to get them, or do they just hand over the keys?
I think they're probably gonna hand over the keys, and the reason the building principal's not doing it is because they probably have 17 other things that are needing to be attended to, not the least of which is the 400 kids that they have in their charge and the 30 staff. They're trying to get those kids in a safe spot. But I don't know the timeline of all of this, and again, Joe probably knows better than I. By the time you get to searching rooms and so forth and so on, we might be well past the end of our school day.
Yeah.
Because ATF's not gonna get here in 20 minutes. think that's gonna be a longer process.
So I think, are the janitors required to stay on campus when everybody else is evacuating?
I think we want the lead custodian here to help people get in rooms, yes.
Because some of our custodians drive bus too, and they would be effectively driving buses to get kids out of here.
Some of them do, but we would want them here to have access to facilities, because the building principal may not be available.
Okay.
We want the authorities, whoever they are, to be able to get where they need to go.
And then, in regards to that, then if they're expected to stay, then would they have a designated place, not that we should announce it here, but would they have a designated place that they go to awaiting for the authorities to get here to be
I
able
think
to?
they would
handle-
need to be centrally available, the point of contact when someone arrives.
Okay,
I would imagine, whatever that entrance would be.
okay, so just
They
as
would
long as we
communicate.
shore up that responsibility,
Yep.
what we expect for them.
Yeah, that's in that crisis action manual, and I can run that past Josh, he's the one that's the keeper of that manual and the updates. I think it was just a confusion, it was being interpreted a different way than it ought to have been.
Okay.
Good question. Other items? I'd like to say one thing before we finish in regards to all of these changes. I know change is hard, and certainly when you talk salary and benefits, it is even harder. There have been some touch and go moments that some of them happened right here in this room in conversation on things. I want to extend my gratitude to the elementary, intermediate, middle, and high school staffs and the support staff for their grace to work with me to try and get this done. And I know it's not my decision, and it isn't done, but I want to make sure that point's not missed, that their patience with me and patience with the process has proven successful, I believe. And I think that we are in a position to make some changes for the better. And at the end of the day, it happened largely in part because they were able to be a part of that process. I will say this in closing, no matter what the circumstance, as long as I am here, support staff and certified staff deserve a voice in their salary and their benefits. The work they do is way too important to not have a voice. So while I will always continue to engage with them, we will have our moments, I am sure, and hopefully they will be quick and over, but it's been an excellent process. So I thank the members of those committees and the staff at large for working through the process with me.
That sounds excellent.
I think I just had one more thing to say, just because that's me, but, I did want to actually just thank Joe and thank Andrea for both being here tonight on a night that you certainly didn't have to be here, and nobody would blame you if neither one of you were here tonight. And for myself, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I know it's been a really long, hard week for both of you, and thanks for being here and showing up and doing the work of the district when you certainly didn't have to, and nobody would blame you if you hadn't. And thanks for everything that you guys have done and that you continue to do, and the capacity that you serve in both ways.
You're worth it.
All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Char, second.
Second.
Dale, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.